Welcome to Snoozecast, the podcast designed to help you fall asleep. Find us on snoozecast.com and follow us on Instagram @snoozecast to find behind-the-scenes content. If you'd like to get an email once a week with upcoming sleep stories and other news, subscribe to the Snoozeletter at snoozecast.com. This episode is brought to you by our Patreon supporters and by Lilac Groves. Tonight, we'll read the next part to our Magic Cloak series from the book Queen Zixie of Ix, or The Story of the Magic Cloak, a children's book written by L. Frank Baum and published in 1905. The Magic Cloak Episode 1 aired on November 11th, 2019. If you'd like to listen to this continuing story easily in order, go to snoozecast.com/series. The events of the book alternate between Noland and Ix, two neighboring regions to the Land of Oz. Baum, who also wrote The Wizard of Oz, commented that this was the best book he had written. In the last episode, Tollydob, the Lord High General, is wearing the cloak when he wishes he were 10 feet tall and immediately grows to that height. The Lord High Executioner, Tellydeb, wishes he could reach an apple at the top of a tree, and he suddenly has arms that can grow to whatever length he needs. Finally, Tallydab, the Lord High Steward, wishes his dog Ruffles could talk, and he now has a dog that not only talks, but talks back. Let's get cozy. Close your eyes. Relax your body into the softness of your bed. Now, take a few deep breaths. It was growing dusk when old Tillydib, the Lord High Purse-bearer, stole into the garden and sat upon the bench to smoke his pipe in peace. All the afternoon, he had been worried by people with bills for this thing or that, and the royal purse was very light indeed when Tillydib had at last managed to escape to the garden. If this keeps up, he reflected, there'll be no money left, and then I'm sure I don't know what will become of us all. The air was chilly. The old counselor shivered a little, and, noting the cloak that lay over the back of the seat, drew it about his shoulders. "It'll be 5 months," he muttered half aloud, "before we can tax the people for more money. And before 5 months are up, the king and his counselors may all starve, even in this splendid palace. Hey-ho, I wish the royal purse would always remain full, no matter how much money I drew from it." The big purse, which had lain lightly on his knee, now slid off and pulled heavily upon the golden chain which the old man wore around his neck to fasten the purse to him securely. Aroused from his thoughts, Tillydib lifted the purse to his lap again and was astonished to feel its weight. He opened the clasp and saw that the huge sack was actually running over with gold pieces. Now, Where on earth did all this wealth come from? He exclaimed, shaking his head in a puzzled way. I'll go at once and pay some of the creditors who are waiting for me. So he ran to the royal treasury, which was a front room in the palace, and began paying everyone who presented an account. He expected presently to empty the purse, but no matter how heavily he drew upon the contents, it remained ever as full as in the beginning. It must be, thought the old man, when the last bill had been paid, that my idle wish has in some mysterious way been granted. But he did not know he owed his good fortune to the magic cloak, which he still wore. As he was leaving the room, he met the king and Princess Fluff, who were just come from dinner, and the girl exclaimed, "Why, there's my cloak. Where did you get it, Tillydib?" "I found it in the garden," answered the Lord High Purse-bearer, "but take it if it's yours, and here is something to repay you for the loan of it." And he poured into her hands a heap of glittering gold. "Oh, thank you," cried Fluff, and taking the precious cloak, she dropped the gold into it and carried it to her room. "I'll never lend it again unless it's really necessary," she said to herself. "It was very careless of Aunt Rivette to leave my fairy cloak in the garden." And then, after carefully folding it and wrapping it up, she locked it in a drawer and hid the key where no one but herself could find it. Chapter 11. The Witch Queen. It's not very far from the kingdom of Noland to the kingdom of Ix. If you followed the steps of Quavo, the minstrel, you would climb the sides of a steep mountain range and go down on the other side and cross a broad and swift river and pick your way through a dark forest. You would then have reached the land of Ix and would find an easy path into the big city. But even before one came to the city, he would see the high marble towers of Queen Zixie's magnificent palace and pause to wonder at its beauty. Quavo the minstrel had been playing his harp in the city of Nole, and his eyes were sharp, so he had seen many things to gossip and sing about, and therefore never doubted he would be warmly welcomed by Queen Zixie. He reached the marble palace about dusk one evening and was bidden to the feast which was about to be served. A long table ran down the length of the lofty hall built in the center of the palace, and this table was covered with gold and silver platters bearing many kinds of meats and fruits and vegetables, while tall, ornamented stands contained sweets and delicacies to tickle the palate. At the head of the table, on a jeweled throne, sat Queen Zixie herself, a vision of radiant beauty and charming grace. Her hair was yellow as spun gold, and her wondrous eyes were raven black in hue. Her skin was fair as a lily, save where her cheek was faintly tinted with a flush of rose color. Dainty and lovely indeed was the Queen of Ix in her appearance, yet none of her lords or attendants cast more than a passing glance upon her beauty, for they were used to seeing her thus. There were graybeards at her table this evening who could remember the Queen's rare beauty since they were boys, aye, and who had been told by their fathers and grandfathers of Queen Zixie's loveliness when they also were mere children. In fact, no one in Ix had ever heard of the time when the land was not ruled by this same queen, or when she had not, in appearance, looked as young and fair as she was today, which easily proves she was not an ordinary person at all. And I may as well tell you here that Queen Zixie, despite the fact that she looked to be no more than 16, was in reality 683 years of age, and had prolonged her life in this extraordinary way by means of the arts of witchcraft. I do not mean by this that she was an evil person. She had always ruled her kingdom wisely and liberally, and the people of Ix made no manner of complaint against their queen. If there were a war, she led her armies in person, clad in golden mail and helmet, and in years of peace, she taught them to sow and reap grain, and to fashion many useful articles of metal, and to build strong and substantial houses. Nor were her taxes ever more than the people could bear. Yet, for all this, Zixie was more feared than loved, for everyone remembered she was a witch, and also knew she was hundreds of years old. So, no matter how amiable their queen might be, she was always treated with extreme respect, and folks weighed well their words when they conversed with her. Next the queen, on both sides of the table, sat her most favored nobles and their ladies. Farther down were the rich merchants and officers of the army, and at the lower end were servants and members of the household, for this was the custom in the land of Ix. Quavo, the harpist, sat near the lower end, and when all had been comfortably fed, the queen called upon him for a song. This was the moment Quavo had eagerly awaited. He took his harp, seated himself in a niche of the wall, and, according to the manner of ancient minstrels, he sang of the things he had seen in other lands, thus serving his hearers with the news of the day, as well as pleasing them with his music. This is the way he began. Of Noland now a tale I'll sing, where reigns a strangely youthful king, a boy who has by chance alone been called to sit upon a throne. His sister shares his luck, and she, the fairy's friend, is said to be, for they did mystic arts invoke, and weave for her a magic cloak, which grants its wearer, thus untold, gifts more precious far than gold. She's but to wish, and her desire quite instantly she will acquire, and when she lends it to her friends, the favor unto them extends. For one who wears the cloak can fly like any eagle in the sky, and one did wish by sudden freak his dog be granted power to speak. And now the beast can talk as well as I, and also read and spell. And stop, cried the queen with sudden excitement. Do you lie, minstrel, or are you speaking the truth? Secretly glad that his news was received thus eagerly, Quavo continued to twang the harp as he replied in verse. Now may I die at break of day, if false is any word I say. And what is this cloak like, and who owns it? Demanded the queen impetuously. Sang the minstrel, the cloak belongs to Princess Fluff. 'Tis woven of some secret stuff, which makes it gleam with splendor bright, that fills beholders with delight. Thereafter, the beautiful Zixie remained lost in thought, her dainty chin resting within the hollow of her hand, and her eyes dreamily fixed upon the minstrel. And Quavo, judging that his news had brought him into rare favor, told more and more wonderful tales of the magic cloak, some of which were true, while others were mere inventions of his own. For newsmongers, as everyone knows, were ever unable to stick to facts since the world began. All the courtiers and officers and servants listened with wide eyes and parted lips to the song, marveling greatly at what they had heard, and When it was finally ended, and the evening far spent, Queen Zixie threw a golden chain to the minstrel as a reward and left the hall, attended by her maidens. Throughout the night which followed, she tossed sleeplessly upon her bed, thinking of the magic cloak and longing to possess it. And when the morning rose, and the sun along with it over the horizon, she made a solemn vow that she would secure the magic cloak within a year, even if it cost her the half of her kingdom. Now, the reason for this rash vow, showing Zixie's intense desire to possess the cloak, was very peculiar. Although she had been an adept at witchcraft for more than 600 years, and was able to retain her health and remain in appearance young and beautiful, there was one thing her art was unable to deceive, and that one thing was a mirror. To mortal eyes, Zixie was charming and young, yet her reflection in a mirror showed her to be ugly and old, bald of head, wrinkled, with toothless gums and withered, sunken cheeks. For this reason, the queen had no mirror of any sort about the palace. Even from her own dressing room, the mirror had been banished, and she depended upon her maids and hairdressers to make her look as lovely as possible. She knew she was beautiful in appearance to others. Her maids declared it continually, and in all eyes she truly read admiration. But Zixie wanted to admire herself, and that was impossible so long as the cold mirrors showed her reflection to be the old hag others would also have seen, had not her arts of witchcraft deceived them. Everything else a woman and a queen might desire, Zixie was able to obtain by her arts. Yet the one thing she could not have made her very unhappy. As I have already said, she was not a bad queen. She used her knowledge of sorcery to please her own fancy, or to benefit her kingdom, but never to injure anyone else. So, she may be forgiven for wanting to see a beautiful girl reflected in the mirror, instead of a haggard old woman in her 684th year. Zixie had given up all hope of ever accomplishing her object until she heard of the magic cloak. The powers of witches are somewhat limited, but she knew that the powers of fairies are boundless. So, If the magic cloak could grant any human wish, as Quavo's song had told her was the case, she would manage to secure it and would at once wish for a reflection in the mirror of the same features all others beheld. And then she would become happy and content. Now, as might be expected, Queen Zixie lost no time in endeavoring to secure the magic cloak. The people of Ix were not on friendly terms with the people of Noland, so she could not visit Princess Fluff openly, and she knew it was useless to try to borrow so priceless a treasure as a cloak, which had been the gift of the fairies. But one way remained to her: to steal the precious robe. So she began her preparations by telling her people she would be absent from Ix for a month, and then she retired to her own room and mixed, by the rules of witchcraft, a black mess in a silver kettle and boiled it until it was as thick as molasses. Of this inky mixture, she swallowed 2 teaspoonfuls every hour for 6 hours, muttering an incantation each time. At the end of the 6 hours, her golden hair had become brown, and her black eyes had become blue, and this was quite sufficient to disguise the pretty queen so that no one would recognize her. Then she took off her richly embroidered queenly robes and hung them up in a closet, putting on a simple gingham dress, a white apron, and a plain hat, such as common people of the country wore. When these preparations had been made, Zixie slipped out the back door of the palace and walked through the city to the forest, and although she met many people, no one suspected that she was the queen. It was rough walking in the forest, but she got through at last and reached the bank of the river. Here, a fisherman was found who consented to ferry her across in his boat. And afterward, Zixie climbed the high mountain and came down the other side into the kingdom of Noland.